Tottenham Hotspur 3, Burnley 0. Welcome to the Premier League for the new boys. If you're not clinical and you can't defend properly, you're going to be in trouble. Mark Donaldson, Shaka, Hislop. Spurs, well, they weren't great in the Premier League last season under Ange Postecoglou. They were really good in the Europa League. What did you make of their performance today, Shaka? And what about the new boys, Burnley?
I'll start with Spurs. It's difficult to make a true and proper assessment because you are playing against one of the newly promoted teams and among the favourites to go straight back down in Burnley. That being said, all you can do is play against the opponent. Opening day at home, new manager, fresh off a disappointment against PSG in European Super Cup. I wanted to see how they responded. And truth be told, I think the scoreline tells as much of a story as you need to know. I never felt that Spurs were in any real danger, and I know Burnley had certainly far more possession than I expected. I don't know where the final stat landed, but never really seemed to trouble Spurs, if I can say that. Probably the most awkward moment for Vicario was kind of his own making. A deflected shot that I thought he made more of than should have been. Other than that, it was Spurs looked the only winner throughout, and in the end, it took a new boy in Kudus down the right hand side to provide two assists for Richarlison, one of the older boys, and while there'll be a lot of focus on Richarlison's second finish, his first was also a very good one. So credit to Richarlison for his performance here. Much needed for Spurs. Good start to get the new season rolling.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the stats here, and Spurs scored 3 from 6 shots on target. Burnley scored none and had 11 total shots. And look, it is a big step up for Burnley, but defensively, you can't really allow the cross to come in because Kudus was good at West Ham, but you just wondered, he's probably got the ability for a better team than West Ham. Spurs went and got him in, and he's got 2 assists today. He's a brilliant player, but you've got to be better from Burnley because he can cause so many problems.
Without question. And listen, you're right. Kudus was very good for West Ham, very direct, and Spurs wanted that down their flanks, and they may yet add in before the close of this transfer window. I don't know if you're going to get any transfer speculation around Spurs, but Kudus certainly was the biggest threat. And to that point, if you're Burnley, if you're Scott Parker, and you're looking at how those first 2 goals came, you have to be. From a Burnley perspective, you have to be disappointed. Now we can talk about the brilliant play of Kudus. That's from a Spurs perspective. From a Burnley perspective, you have to be disappointed. The first, I thought Kudus was double teamed, got the benefit of a deflection, but then he then gets onto the ball quicker. Defense drops off and leaves Kudus one-on-one with his man, and that's a recipe for disaster. In the second, again, Kudus was left one-on-one and just was having an absolute field day. That being said, as I mentioned off the top, the 2 finishes from Richarlison were really something special, especially the second. But from a Burnley perspective, you simply have to do better when you find yourself man on man with somebody like Kudus down the wide areas.
I like Richarlison, but he can be a heck of a frustrating player to
Yeah.
watch, and I don't even support Spurs. But the fact that Solanke was on the bench and is probably the first choice, he went with this kind of 4-2-3-1 with Pat Matissar, Kudus on one side and Johnson on the other. From a Richarlison perspective, the fact he's got Solanke ready and waiting to come in, you don't lose the jersey when you score 2 goals. So when Solanke comes back in, where does Richarlison fit in? And is it a 4-2-3-1 that you think Thomas Frank will continue with?
I think you don't change a winning team. And yes, as I said, again, off the top, you are playing against newly promoted Burnley, so it's difficult to make a full and proper assessment. But kind of given the understanding, the understanding between Kudus and Richarlison, given the finishing of Richarlison. And while you could question maybe the finishing of Richarlison through not just his Spurs career, but I also did similarly when he was at Everton, on today's showing, you can't ask any more. And as a result, the nature of the game is possession is 9/10 of the law. And Solanke, while I'm sure was penciled in as if fully fit as Spurs started throughout, and to your point, Mark, Richarlison maybe playing a supporting role. Given what we saw over the last 90 minutes, you simply can't, you cannot drop Richarlison,
Yeah.
and I don't think there's any reason to change the formation, the setup.
Is there anything obvious you've noticed that's different from Spurs under Thomas Frank than what we saw under Postecoglou?
Well, I thought if we are talking about differences in Spurs, and again, Burnley aside, I'm more looking at the game against PSG, where I thought for a lot of it, they equipped themselves well. Started off by pressing high up the park, had PSG under some trouble, obviously took the lead, but then as the game drew on, they dropped off and got deeper and deeper and just allowed PSG to pass the ball and dominate the game later on. Now, that being said, losing, albeit even on penalties, to who I still think is Europe's best football team, and I can hear Chelsea fans screaming from where I am, but I stand by that. I think PSG are Europe's best team. Is no shame in Spurs, but you saw what you can do against good opposition. Certainly early on when you're fresh, when you press high up, and how effective it can be. That for me is what you will hope to see from Thomas Frank going forward. I thought what you also saw in that game was Spurs. I don't want to say reliance. I'm looking for a better word, but their use of set pieces to very good effect against PSG. Now there was no reliance on those set pieces today. Maybe that will come against better opposition, but at the very least, you know that you can go toe to toe with good footballing teams. Just don't drop off. You've got to be able to last certainly longer than the 40 or 45 minutes than you did against PSG.
5 minutes ago or so, you suggested that we may be talking about transfers for Spurs. So let's do that, because he started, Thomas Frank, with Archie Gray, who's can play in so many different positions, alongside Berival, young, energetic, hungry defensive midfielder. Obviously, Rodrigo Bentancur coming off the bench. He's probably someone that's going to start most games. So where do you think Spurs, if there was one area rather than one player that you would like them to strengthen in that could take them from maybe top 10 to potentially challenging for a European spot via their league position next season?
Well, I thought Spurs were at their best when James Maddison was at his best early on last season. Now, through injuries, and then when he came back from that initial injury, I don't think Maddison was as creatively good as he had been, and Spurs struggled. Well, that wasn't the only reason, but for any number of reasons. Now they've been linked with Eze to come in from Crystal Palace. We'll see if that gets done. But Eze is a player I like a lot, and whether you play him on the left hand side, whether you play him in behind that front one or front two, we see how things progress. I think he adds a level of creativity that Spurs probably haven't had since Maddison was at his best. And then again, kind of given the success of Kudus down the right hand side, if as it drifts out left, it provides again a threat from both sides that I don't think they had for much of last season. So if they are able to add Eze to the squad, I think it again takes them up a level. Whether it's enough to see them go from 17th to competing for top four, I'm not sure. But I think without question, if they can get the finishing that we saw today, and I know that's a very tall order, if they can get that with any kind of consistency, with that double threat wherever it does come from in Eze and Kudus, it makes Spurs a tasty prospect if they can avoid injuries and suspensions. I'm thinking Van de Ven and Romero respectively during the course of this season.
You mentioned Spurs finishing 17th last season. It was a big disappointment for them. Someone who would love to finish 17th this season is Scott Parker, because that would mean Burnley are safe. It's one game. They did create. They could have scored a goal or two. They need to be more clinical in front of goal. But he has to get this balance right, doesn't he, between how much you push forward and how much you just still try and have to protect, because you're up against better players this season. The league is not going to be won and lost. Your position is not going to be won and lost by games at Spurs and tough fixtures like that. But do they need to be a little bit more, as we would say in Scotland, canny, just a little bit more cautious with regards to the way that they play in certain games?
Cautious. I'm not sure is the right word or right approach for Burnley right now. And listen,
Ambitions, then.
I've been in this position as a newly promoted side, and I can, as I proudly say, I've never been relegated. What every single newly promoted team I've played for has done, and this has been into the Premier League, into the Championship, even into League One, is you have to get off to a good start. And this was not that from Burnley. This was certainly a wake-up call at the very least. It could serve as a punch in the chin. Again, for me, kind of given how lightweight they were up front, you wonder where those goals are going to come from. And now, again, just talking from my own experiences, when you aren't able to score, when you aren't able to find answers, it forces the team to play a whole lot deeper, because you know that to get anything out of a game, you cannot concede. You cannot afford to concede one, let alone three, as they did today, and then that again takes away from your attacking threat. So it's a huge order for Burnley here. But again, like Spurs, they still, like everybody else, they've got a couple of weeks left in the transfer window. Scott Parker needs to somehow add to that. He needs to find goal. He needs to find some kind of attacking focus, because it was not on evidence today.
There was only one downside for Spurs today, and that was the alphabet, because Sunderland are top of the table by one letter, because they also won by 3-0 against West Ham. Now, you didn't watch this one, and I'm not going to ask you
Thankfully.
about it. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
However, it's some result for Sunderland, and as a former Newcastle player, any positive words that you can say about your former rivals?
Contractually, I'm not allowed to to speak too glowingly about Sunderland. But again, just given what I just said about newly promoted teams and staying up, you have to get off to a good start, and Sunderland did exactly that. And credit to them. West Ham. Some people, I know, I can't remember who on FC predicted West Ham to be relegated. But this is concerning. I didn't see it. I thought Graham Potter coming in would change things a lot. And even though you lose the likes of Kudus, now I'm reading speculation about Paqueta and him wanting out. It's very, very concerning what all of a sudden has kind of taken shape over the last 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, there is actually some small print when you got the freedom of Newcastle that if you ever praise Sunderland, you lose the ability to take your sheep through the city centre and down the Gallowgate in Newcastle. So well done on kind of avoiding that. The other game, by the way, Rodrigo Muniz scoring with practically the last kick of the ball at the Amex to earn Fulham a point in a 1-1 draw at Brighton after Matt O'Reilly's penalty put the team owned by Tony Bloom into the lead. So we have Sunderland top of the table by one letter from Tottenham Hotspur after the first 5 games now, with Liverpool scoring 4 yesterday. Join us later today, live on the full-time whistle for Wolves against Man City reaction. We'll see you then. Bye for